One of the most powerful prosecution offices in the country sits in Lower Manhattan, prosecuting everyone from bankers to mobsters. They threw the book at Michael Cohen even after Mueller credited his cooperation, and they're currently probing these issues touching Trump.org, the National Enquirer, Trump Tower. And the prosecutors who run this office go on to pretty big things. Rudy Giuliani ran it before becoming New York's mayor. He was succeeded by Benito Romano. James Comey ran it before getting tapped as number 2 at DOJ and was succeeded by David Kelly. Preet Bharara ran it under Obama through the start of 2017 until Trump fired him. Bharara dedicating his new book to the former colleagues there, writing for the fearless women and men of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, the best place I will ever work. These prosecutors have been fighting the good fight in the spotlight for years.
The indictment alleges that he both made attempts to influence Mr. Meese.
This trial was about crimes, very serious crimes.
To announce what we believe is the largest identity fraud case in United States history.
Civil RICO, as the chairman so aptly observed earlier, has become a powerful weapon in the government's efforts against organized crime.
Our unfinished fight against public corruption continues. You should stay tuned.
We turn now to 2 former U.S. attorneys from that very office, Preet Bharara and Benito Romano. Thanks to both of you for doing this.
Sure. Thank you for having us.
Preet, you dedicate the whole book to the people who work in this office. Why?
And also my family. You left that out. Well, my family to know it's also dedicated to them. Look, I think at this time when everyone is thinking about what the Southern District does, why it does what it does, I wanted to reflect on those things. And the greatest honor of my life was working in a place that had a great tradition, but also had some of the best people I've ever met. And so people like me and Benito were sometimes be in front of a camera, and our names were on the indictments during the time we had the honor of leading the office. But the real heroes are the men and women, the investigators, the staff, the prosecutors, the civil lawyers who do all the work of that place.
When you talk to an assistant after he's left the office or she's left the office and they look back at the office, the one thing they say most often is, oh, I didn't want to be a supervisor. I wanted to be a line assistant because that was the best job you could possibly have, just being a line assistant.
You walk in that office that both of you ran, and you look down the hall, and you've got a room where Michael Cohen, the president's lawyer, spilled the beans.
Right.
And you've got another room where mob bosses and their captains, as you write in the book, were debriefed about a whole life of crime. What are the scariest people you dealt with, and how do you, to those of us who don't understand how this works, how do you not get scared when you're dealing with mobsters?
Well, sometimes you do. I mean, we've had assistants that had protection provided to them by the Marshal Service.
Because of death threats? Because
of death threats. And some of them have really sacrificed tremendously in their inconvenience in their personal lives because they've had marshals living with them in their apartments for months at a time. So, yes, you do get scared. I mean, I was threatened once, and I'm sure it's happened to Preet as well, and you just learn to live with it. You know you're doing the right thing if you're making people like that angry at you.
A lot of people are asking about whether a president could be indicted. And another person who held the same post that you each did, David Kelly, spoke to that question on this show. Take a look.
It's a policy. It's not the law. Policies can be bent. Policies can be broken.
If you were back in that office, I'm not naming a president, say any president, President Johnson, President X, would you have considered that a potential option on the table?
Sure.
Benito, do you agree?
Yes, and I'm not surprised at all to hear David say that.
So that's a count of 2, if we're doing a head count, that yes, it's a policy, yes, but warranted, not naming the president. You think the office could move forward that way?
Yes.
Preet?
Yeah, so I'm going to disappoint some people. If the policy of the department, written down, even if you disagree with it, with respect to something so important like the immunity of a president of the United States, and you have a campaign finance violation that you think you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt if you went to trial against the president, against the backdrop of that policy, I'm going to be bold here and say, no, I would not indict that case.
But it sounds like you're exercising discretion.
Yeah, because of the policy, in part. Because,
yes, policy is a sound policy, but as policy,
if you're going to do something like indict the president of the United States, which is going to cause a rift in the country, which is going to cause some people to think that you're political and result-oriented, and you don't even have on your side the policy of the stated policy of the Justice Department, I think you're going to cause a lot of people to lose faith in the decision, even if it's the correct decision, given that that policy is in place. We should change the policy.
But the fact that you can indict a president doesn't mean you actually indict the president. You may decide, for all the reasons you just enumerated, that you would exercise judgment against a prosecution because it would tear the country apart, because the crime that you're prosecuting for, or whoever the president is a relatively minor offense that's not typically prosecuted in the federal system, or some other reason. But it sounds like you're saying, it sounds to me like you're saying the policy will survive as a policy as long as you don't, but you would not want to use it in this case. In the case you,
I guess depending on how you're parsing it, am I saying that I would behave in accordance with a policy, or would I, in consideration of the policy among other factors, choose in a campaign finance case not to indict the sitting president? And maybe that's more accurate. It's a little bit splitting hairs, but to the extent you may be correct, I'll say that if I did have proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the president had, like he likes to say he can, shot someone in broad daylight on Fifth Avenue and killed that person, then I might not abide by the policy.
That's, yeah. Or instead of arguing over profits taken out of the Trump Hotel, it's a direct payment, like a bribe, you might feel differently. So I think we're not in significant disagreement.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is,
it sounds like Benito has pressed you beyond one hypothetical, as prosecutors and lawyers sometimes do, into the notion that if the policy is you're never allowed to indict, that would be a blank check for anything. And while Preet seems more skeptical than you and David, you have pulled Preet towards saying there are situations where you would override the policy and indict a president.
Preet said that.
Yeah, I said
I said that, actually.
He's very persuasive, but I've said it before.
So you agree on that?
Yeah, I think there's a reason why the president is treated a little bit differently. No one's supposed to be above the law, and I agree with that. But you do have this argument over the Constitution and the indictability of the president. You also do have the president, among very few others, who's subject to a different kind of check, which is impeachment and conviction in the Senate. You also, as we've been learning, that a president of the United States can flout all sorts of laws, including doesn't have to be qualified for security clearance, gets one anyway, can tell anyone else to override professionals saying that someone gets a security clearance or not, doesn't really have to divest himself of anything. And when you're taking an action against a public official, and I dealt with this at a much smaller, fearless in charging publicly elected officials, but we always thought really hard about it and thought you don't want to change the will of the people because you've decided to take an action unless you really have your I's dotted and your T's crossed. It's very important.
I'm very glad Preet brought that up, because as we're debating this question of whether you can indict a president, it's the same process that would have gone on in the U.S. Attorney's Office for you deciding to indict a congressman or some elected official. You sweat and suffer the details, you talk it through repeatedly, you make sure not only that you have the evidence to support it, because it would be a terrible thing to bring an indictment and then lose the case, but you want to make sure that you're doing the right thing, that it's the correct, proper exercise of discretion, that you've considered all the mitigating circumstances and all of the aggravating circumstances, and you've come to the right decision.
Hearing both of you tease that out responsibly is fascinating. It really is. Why are you smiling?
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. All right.
Preet Bharara, Benito Romano, my thanks to both of you. I really appreciate it. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.